Right, starting in section 2 of chapter 7. Again, we're working towards being boringly good. It's like my little quotes got cut off there. Getting boringly good at factoring, which means we're going to follow the same steps over and over again every single time. We're always going to check for the GCF, always. First, it's what we always do. Check for the GCF. Is there anything that all the terms have in common? And next we'll ask ourselves, how many terms are there? If there's 2 terms, we're going to use our special formulas of difference of squares, difference of cubes, sum of cubes. There is no formula for sum of squares. That can't go any further. But there are formulas for difference of squares, difference of cubes, sum of cubes. And that's what we looked at in 7.4. The first part of 7.4. The GCF was in 7.1a. 4 terms we just completed in 7.1b, and for that we used factoring by grouping. If there's 4 terms left after you look for a GCF, you factor by grouping. And hopefully you've done the problem set for that and it went fairly smoothly. Most people feel very confident with factoring by grouping, and so that's why we're going to look at factoring 3 terms instead of the guess and test type method that you may have been exposed to the first time around, which can feel kind of easy to some, more like a puzzle to others, and sometimes that's not very enjoyable. So let's see if we can find a solid way, an alternative. And this is what we're going to be covering in 7.2 and 7.3 is how to factor with 3 terms. And what we're going to do is we're going to convert it to 4 terms. That way we can use the factoring by grouping. And I wrote group, so what I really should have written was grouping. So let's recall just a couple pieces of information. What is factoring? Well, factoring is undoing the multiplication or the distribution or the foiling. We've done this several times now, so I'm abbreviating a little bit. It's undoing the multiplication, the distribution, undoing the foiling. And we're going to look at what it means to undo the FOIL specifically, because our goal of going from 3 to 4 terms, how do we convert it to 4 terms? It's the strategic split of what I'm going to refer to as the B term. And we'll talk about what that is in just a moment. In other words, the OI, when you foiled, when you did the first times first, outside times outside, in times inside, last times last, when you had a foiling situation, A plus B, C plus D, first times first, last times last, what you may have noticed is that your outside inside pieces, your outside times outside, inside times inside, created like terms. A lot of times it created like terms, and then you were to combine them. So essentially when you first foiled, before you combined the OI like terms, you had the 4 terms. And from there we can factor by grouping. So what we're going to do is look at what that OI piece is and split it back into the results of the outside and the inside. Split it back into the 2 original pieces before they're combined as like terms. So what do I mean by splitting the B term? Well, let's recall that the standard form of a trinomial, 3 terms, looked like this. ax squared plus bx, pardon me, plus bx plus c. And this is some Math 60 information that hopefully you were exposed to. If not, now's the time to get it learned here. The standard form of a trinomial, ax squared plus bx plus c. In other words, you've got an x squared piece times some sort of coefficient, an x piece with some sort of coefficient, a number in front, and then a constant. And so when we talk about splitting the B term, we're talking about trying to split this term right here, the middle piece of that trinomial. Let's look at some examples and we'll fill in the steps, and it'll make a lot more sense as we go.